5 Live Formula One.
Good afternoon, welcome to live coverage of round 9 of the Formula One World Championship. The second triple header of the year is almost complete as Formula One arrives on well-trodden ground in Barcelona at the Circuit de Catalunya this weekend, with just 3 points separating the two McLaren drivers at the top of the standings, an ever-tightening midfield, or indeed an entire field, and a technical directive to get to grips with. There's just a tad to get stuck into. We're a few minutes away from the green light for FP1. So welcome, my name's Harry Benjamin, and I'm delighted to be joined this weekend for the first time by former F2 driver, Alpine F1 development driver and current British sports car ace, Ollie Caldwell. Welcome to the team, Ollie. How are you?
Hi, Harry. I am good, thank you. And it is great to be here commentating on the Formula One. Hopefully it's a bit more exciting than last weekend.
Yeah, well, let's hope so. We don't bite, I promise you. We'll warm up into it. I mean, we reflect on last week with you, but first, the season so far, I mean, how have you been enjoying it?
I think it's been great, honestly, with the implementation of the new rookies, who I believe are all doing a great job. The championship order in a different place to where we normally see it. New teams coming up the order, and some teams struggling, certainly at the beginning of the year, is great to see.
I think it is living up to the hype that we were trying to create at the start of the season, at the very least. While it's still fresh in the memory, and I promise if Fernando Alonso and Nico Hülkenberg are listening, which I doubt they will be, but if they are, we're not going to drone on about it too much. But we are fresh off the back of Monaco, where we had a 2 stops mandatory as a result of having to have 3 sets of tyres, 3 tyre compounds being used during the race. How do you reflect on what we saw in Monaco? Especially, you've driven that track, you know what a place it is, particularly on qualifying day, but it just seems like we're missing a trick still on that Sunday race day.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it's been well spoken about, and the Formula One and the FIA are really trying to make the race exciting, but it just seems to be the nature of the track at the moment. One thing that was very interesting, and I know it was an interesting and some would say boring race to watch, was how the teams handled those 2 stops, and like I sort of said to you off air, was how teams managed that and did very interesting strategies, specifically the Williams. And as boring as it was, we can say it was very cool to see how slow they could go at one point. Very different to what, qualifying, how fast can you go? In the race, it was for them how slow and how much could they hold everyone back.
A proper talent to see how slow you can go around the Monaco circuit. Well, look, I think the drivers were a bit sick and tired of everybody asking questions about that. We'll see. I know Alex Wurz, the chairman of the Grand Prix Drivers Association, was trying to look at ways to maybe tweak the track. I think move the Nouvelle Chicane slightly later to increase the braking distance or increase the braking zone, and try and bring Rascasse in slightly narrower at the apex, but then slightly wider on the edge of the circuit. Two small things, are they enough?
I did see those notes, and I think it moved the braking 80 meters later. First of all, expensive thing to do, which, Monaco may be the place to do that. But is it really going to fix the issue whether 80 meters is going to allow you to lunge? I think personally it's the track width that's the issue, not the braking zones, because sometimes you can get a great run out of the tunnel, as we've seen people do, but you just place the car in the middle of the track and that's it. The track is simply not wide enough to go to abreast when you take a certain line.
I suppose it's the price you pay, isn't it, for having one of the best Saturdays of the year, where everyone is on a knife edge, and then, well, okay, Sunday's what it is, but you're in Monaco and it has that history, that glitz and glam, and I suppose we had to accept it for what it is.
Yeah, definitely. It's a historic race. We know why Formula One goes there, because it is amazing. That Friday and Saturday, having driven around there myself, is unbelievable. That's really where the drivers show their talent, show why they're paid the big bucks in that qualifying, putting it to the edge. And yeah, the trade-off is a race that can sometimes not be as exciting.
Well, look, we now look forward to the Spanish Grand Prix weekend. We are racing through this season. The sunshine is out, blue skies above us. It is a beautiful day in Barcelona. Air temperature 30.1 degrees, track temperature 47.6 degrees. The grandstands slowly building up, the balconies that overlook the garages and the hospitality suites as well, with everybody out trying to get a video of the cars as they head out onto the circuit, and we will get FP1 underway. And one of the main factors to take in this weekend that we've all been waiting for is a technical directive has been introduced to do with the front wings and their flexibility. The full spiel is the permitted level of flex reduced from 15 millimeters of movement to 10 millimeters, with the delay of its implementation designed to give teams sufficient time to fill the requirements. So this has been coming. It was introduced or told about at least at the beginning of the season. Teams have had a fair amount of time to build up to this. Are we going to see, Ollie, a flip of the order?
I think that depends who you ask, because it seems quite split on the team's PR statement of is it going to make a big difference or not. Personally, I don't think so. You might see it be a little bit closer in qualifying, and with some speeds in the straight line maybe being a bit closer, but like you say, the teams have known about it for a while. It's not something new. They've all tested it before, and I can't see it making a big difference to the order.
Well, let's see how it unfolds. Of course, no surprise on the upgrade list coming into this weekend. Everybody has got a new front wing, so we'll see how they get on, all to do with, I suppose if a wing is flexing, they're doing that for a reason, trying to find any inch of performance they can. But because we've had such a long run up into this, we do expect the teams to be quite on it. Although Red Bull, Ferrari are hoping and pinning almost a little bit of performance change on this front. Green light is on at the end of the pit lane. Cars heading out onto the track. For those who wish to do a sync up, it's coming at you now. It's 58 minutes and 23, 22, 21. 20 seconds remain of free practice 1, and we actually have a couple of new faces to bring you up to speed with. Although if you have been listening to us throughout the season, you'll know Ryo Hirakawa, the Japanese sports car driver, indeed a champion in the World Endurance Championship for Toyota. He is back for another run out with the Haas team in place of Esteban Ocon, and making his FP1 debut down at Williams, already out on track, is the Frenchman Victor Martins, the 23-year-old currently racing in Formula 2 for ART. Has already had a test around the Monza circuit with an old Williams, doing some TPC testing, but he gets his Grand Prix weekend debut, does the 2022 Formula 3 champion. So we will watch out for them as they make their way around this circuit. But it is a track, though, that everybody knows almost all too well. Just over 4.6 kilometers, 2.8 miles, 14 turns, 6 go to the left, 8 go to the right, and the home of pre-season testing for so long, not in recent times. But this is a track that if anybody knows it, well, it's all 20 Formula 1 drivers, regardless of if you're a rookie or not.
Yeah, definitely. Like you say, it's been on the calendar for so many years now, and a lot of these drivers will have not have just raced here for years and years in Formula 1. They've been here in Formula 2, in Formula 3, even down to Formula 4, plus the huge amount of test days that they've had here. Everyone knows this like the back of their hand. In fact, I would go as far to say as some drivers have probably run this track and done more laps running this track on their feet than they've driven in some of the other newer circuits around the season.
Huge aero rakes on board some of these cars as well, so usually always the case to bring upgrades around here. Indeed, most people do have that new front wing. There is a big aero rake on either side of the Racing Bulls. Liam Lawson running that. They're running that new front wing, new front end plate, but also whole new nose for them as well. At least that's on the declared list of upgrades for them. But pretty much everybody out on the circuit, bar Victor Martins, has gone back in, along with Lawson, Hulkenberg and Carlos Sainz too, as they continue to get up to speed with this track. I mean, Ollie, what is this track like to drive? You've raced him plenty of times, single-seater and sports cars. You've won around here a couple of years ago in Formula 3 too.
It's a great track. It's a mix of, you've got some big braking zones in turn 1 and turn 10. And then, you've got the high-speed corners at turn 9, turn 3, going a bit slower than they were a few years ago. But like I said, it's a track that everyone knows like the back of their hand. You know where to gain little bits of time here. And with the recent changes, let's look back in the last 5 years, the change of the hairpin, and then the last two corners, I think have really opened up the track to now a great track to race at. Sector 3 used to be quite difficult with how slow speed it was. The rear tyres really struggled through there.
Steering very light as I'm turning. When I'm garage, it was very heavy, a bit weird.
So George Russell, the steering feels very light as I'm turning, but it was heavy when he left the garage. So still trying to dial into that Mercedes then in his first few laps around this circuit.
Yeah, that can be, an issue with the power steering or some electrical sensors. I know some teams weirdly put the power steering super light or super heavy just in the pit lane to make it easier for the driver to, either on pit approach, deal with the slowing down, or just make it easier to get in and out of the garage without the cars being super heavy.
That was the sound of George Russell, by the way, making his way onto the circuit. Top 4 in every Spanish Grand Prix since he joined Mercedes, and had been having a marvellous run this season so far. But Monaco was absolutely, let's face it, dire for both Mercedes drivers. Down in qualifying in that mid-pack. At one point, I think there was a joke online thinking they had forgotten they had to do even one pit stop around Monaco. It was a really rough weekend for both of them, wasn't it, with Kimi Antonelli too?
Yeah, it was. It was a shame that Kimi clipped the barriers in qualifying, and then George with that. Was it an electrical power issue? Yeah, it was a weekend to forget for them. And then I think George showed his frustrations in the race by just going straight on at the chicane past Alex Albon. But they knew it was going to be difficult after those woes in qualifying. And yeah, I think they just wanted to leave pretty much after Saturday.
Well, they'll be hoping for better fortune here. Lando Norris, by the way, has the fastest lap time at the moment, a 1:16.095, with Oscar Piastri a tenth behind. And we have got a Haas car off. That is Ryo Hirakawa in the gravel, but he's making his way back on to the circuit. I think that's coming in towards turn 11 and 12. He's got to go through the right-hander of 12 now, so he might have gone deep, or go through the right-hander of 12, I should say, now. And so somewhere through 10 and 11, Ryo Hirakawa has had an off, but he's back onto the circuit and making his way, I imagine, back to the pit lane, and he does peel off.
Yeah, obviously not the first FP1 that we've seen Ryo here, but it is the first time in a Haas for him. So as he went into the braking of turn 10 there, he's just, locked up and gone straight on into the gravel. So, yeah, a bit of a change from the Alpine that he drove earlier in the year, maybe still getting used to it.
Yeah, but the boss of the Haas, Ayao Komatsu, very complimentary of Ryo Hirakawa's feedback within that team. A world champion in sports car racing.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sorry.
No worries.
Straight to apologise as well from Hirakawa there, and the voice talking to him was Laura Müller, who is normally Esteban Ocon's race engineer, but Ocon sitting this one out. Victor Martins is in place for Alex Albon, by the way, down at Williams. So still everyone with a lap time on the board in the top 15. Martins, Lawson, Hulkenberg, Bortoleto and Sainz, who actually hasn't been out onto the track at all. Everyone has at least done an installation lap. So home hero Carlos Sainz, who has scored points in every single visit to Barcelona for the Spanish Grand Prix, yet to come out in these early stages, but plenty of action kicking things off. In terms of the championship standings, by the way, this is how they look. Oscar Piastri, his lead cut down after Lando Norris's victory in Monaco. 3 points between the two McLaren drivers. Less than a race win occupy the top 3. Max Verstappen within sight. Then it's George Russell, Charles Leclerc, the top 5. And over in the Constructors' Championship, it is McLaren who lead the way with, let's face it, quite a hefty gap over Mercedes. Red Bull third, with Ferrari and Williams going really well so far this season inside that top 5. Haas, Racing Bulls picked up some good points, double points last time out for them in Monaco, sees them up in 7th. Aston Martin dropping down to 8th with Alpine and Sauber, the top 10, or the only 10 teams in Formula 1, but everybody getting a point.
Yeah, I think
Plenty of action underway and lots to get to grips with. It's a return to familiar ground, home for pre-season testing as Barcelona for so long, not in recent times. 3 points separating the two McLaren drivers at the top of the standings, but it's a track that Max Verstappen goes very well on. At the moment, though, it's the home hero, Fernando Alonso, who is fastest, but it's early stages FP1. Okay, 50 minutes and 21:20. 19 seconds remain. Indeed, Alonso has gone fastest ahead of Lando Norris. I mean, it was a statement, wasn't it, last time out from Lando Norris in that qualifying session, do you think, Ollie? Because for a time it felt like, you know, the media was piling on as well. It felt like he was on the back foot a bit. So I wonder if there's a momentum swing happening now for Lando Norris against his teammate.
Yeah, he definitely had the pressure on him going into Monaco, but he pulled it out of the bag and delivered that lap. Whether Charles had some traffic earlier on, who knows, but the end result was that mattered, was that Lando was on pole and then won the race. So definitely a big mood boost, a big momentum boost that he needed, I think, going into this round and into the end of the triple header to claw back some points on his teammate Oscar. But yeah, he definitely put the media out of the question.
What was that?
Yeah, clearly wasn't called.
That was Liam Lawson going down into turn one and finding a Ferrari of Charles Leclerc going much slower on the racing line. And maybe Leclerc not quite getting the call that Lawson was on a hot lap and coming in. But practice, you do get away with that a little bit more than if it was in a qualifying session. But again, that'll be something for Brian Botzi, Charles Leclerc's engineer, to get a little on top of. Leclerc currently fourth, and Liam Lawson out there with big aero rakes on has actually come back to the pits after that. So coming back to Lando Norris and Piastri, I mean, he comes here, he got pole here last year, so that will further give him confidence, surely.
Definitely, knowing that you were pole here last year, knowing that you were pole last weekend, and your car is very strong, is going to give you big confidence. They'll obviously be learning and seeing how much these...
Mid-7, please.
I'm not sure that's what I've done, to be honest.
Yeah, just Max's engineer asking him to change some settings on the steering wheel, but Max not too happy with that. Yeah, obviously, let's see what these new flexi wings do for McLaren. Every team was claiming that McLaren and Mercedes were the biggest winners from that, but I think we'll see very quickly after FP1 and FP2 whether it was a big change or not.
Lando Norris on a quick lap at the moment, fastest of anybody through the first sector on the hard tyre. Pirelli bringing the hardest compounds in the range compared to the last two weekends where we've gone to the softest. So now we have the C1 acting as the hard tyre. That's what Norris is on at the moment. The C2 is the medium and the C3 acting as the soft. But Lando Norris, after getting pole here last year, couldn't quite convert it into that race win after that tough start off the line. He's about to go fastest though by over 0.2 of a second. It's Norris fastest, then Alonso, Verstappen, Piastri and Stroll, who's on the medium tyre, the top 5. Leclerc, Hamilton, Russell, Antonelli, Tsunoda the top 10, with Pierre Gasly in 11th, ahead of Isaac Hadjar, Colapinto, Behrman and Hirakawa the top 15, Gabriel Bortoleto and Nico Hulkenberg, the 17 drivers to set lap times, with Victor Martins, who has been out there, done 3 laps on the board, hasn't got a time though, along with Liam Lawson in the Racing Bulls and Carlos Sainz. Still nothing going on there down at Williams. Trying to find out if there is anything wrong with the car. We're getting pictures at the moment where Sainz is sat inside the cockpit and looks like he is ready to go out. So I wonder if there was perhaps an earlier problem that they've tried to fix, but we'll try and get some confirmation from Williams to see what's going on there. But Sainz, of course, key to get out and show the home crowd what he's got. While Fernando Alonso is up in second, might be a good time to check in on the champ and that pointless run he's currently experiencing. Could this be the weekend, Ollie, that Fernando Alonso scores points?
Maybe with a bit of a home crowd boost, could give him some extra luck. But yeah, he's been pretty unlucky, hasn't he, recently? I think out-qualifying the car, certainly been doing a great job, but just haven't been able to convert it in the race, which arguably is where it matters. But yeah, starting off well, at least in the top 3 in the first 15-20 minutes is always nice. And hopefully his home fans will be cheering him on extra loud as well.
Yeah, he's currently matching his first season in Formula 1, 2001 Minardi. No points at this stage of the season after 8 rounds, which is what he's currently on at the moment. He's felt on the cusp of points in the last couple of races, but does just need that little bit of luck, we think, to go his way. Was having a look back through some of the stats that we always get ahead of time, especially when it comes to Fernando Alonso. Over 200 races since his last win, which came here back in 2013 at the Spanish Grand Prix. So that's tough for Alonso. You wonder where you keep finding that motivation.
Definitely. I mean, that's a long time for a last win, but he did have that streak a couple of years ago in the Aston Martin, of course, when they had a great start to the season and he got multiple podiums. So maybe that boosted his battery a little bit for a few more years, just getting a nice couple of second and thirds and being on the cusp of the win. But yeah, it's hard to especially not get points. That's really tough for a driver.
Well, with Adrian Newey working hard on the 2026 car, I'm sure that'll be motivation enough for Fernando Alonso to see what comes of it. Let's see how they go this weekend. Of course, they have been bringing upgrades over the course of the last couple of races. Imola did introduce a small upgrade, which did see some gains for the AMR 25. So let's see if Alonso can finally get his first points of the year come the checkered flag on Sunday. Currently sitting in second. Max Verstappen is third. Now, Ollie, we talk about Norris and Piastri often as if it's just them in the battle for this championship, but Max Verstappen is a race win away from taking the lead. Are we overlooking Max Verstappen at the moment in this title hunt?
He definitely should not be put out of the equation. You know, looking at the driver's standings, the top 3 are, let's say, in their own little world, but Max is definitely hanging on in there. And if he can have a good weekend, a safety car can throw up some hurdles for other teams, a good strategy, which we know his engineer can do, he's well in this title fight, and I think outperforming the car as well. He's doing a great job this season from especially the first few rounds.
Just seeing a couple of I think it's impeding. There's the Racing Bulls of Isaac Hadjar, coming through the right-hander of turn 12, and he's got Lewis Hamilton right behind him, and Hadjar was quite slow and then sped up on the exit of the corner and rather balked Hamilton, who was trying to find a way through. But again, FP1, you tend to get away with that kind of thing. But how frustrating is that as a driver when you're, it's in sessions like this, when you've got your run plan, you've got so many laps to do it, and then you have someone dawdling on the racing line and kind of scuppering a lap for you right in the closing stages.
It's really annoying. Yeah, there's not really a worse feeling, especially if you're on what is a very good lap and you get impeded. You get emotional on the radio, as we've seen some drivers do, but that specific instance, both drivers were going quite slow on the exit of turn 10 through turn 11 and 12, and honestly what it looked like from the outside was they're both going on a push lap for this lap, and Isaac did not want Lewis to get past him and give him some dirty air, so he sort of closed the door at the last minute just to make sure Lewis couldn't get through, and so that he had the clear air going on to that start of the push lap.
Lewis Hamilton, one of the most successful drivers around this track, ties with Michael Schumacher for the most wins and ties for the most podiums as well at 12 apiece for him and Michael Schumacher. If Lewis Hamilton is able to find himself onto the podium this weekend, it will become his most successful circuit, tied with Silverstone for 13 podium places apiece. So let's see if Hamilton can find something there. Carlos Sainz, by the way, is now out on track. He's made his way out into it's just actually coming towards the end of a lap. Backing off and getting out of it is Sainz in that Williams. I was talking on our preview show for the checkered flag, which in between the gap between FP1 and FP2 you can find on BBC Sounds and have a listen to myself, Jolyon Palmer and Jenny Gow. But we were talking about Williams, and I kind of almost deferred to thinking of them always as a struggling midfielder, but they have massively impressed this year, would you say?
Yeah, their comeback is one of the strongest, and considering that James Vowles says they're not really trying as hard as they could be, they're more looking for the new regulations in 2026, is very impressive. You look at the Williams a few years ago, really down in the dumps, right at the back of the grid in every single session, and no sponsors on the car, to where they are now, the car full of sponsors, and they're getting points fairly consistency. Obviously signed Carlos as well to partner with Alex Albon on. They got a really strong driver pairing. Their focus, as they say, is on next year, so their only way is up, really, from where they were, and they're certainly showing that.
Oh, it's actually just something that's either come off the car or been flicked up by Victor Martins in the other Williams, who is getting his first FP1 running of his career, and for Williams this season. The 23-year-old from France, the 2020 Formula Renault Euro Cup champion, followed that up with a Formula 3 championship in 2022. Spent the last couple of years in Formula 2. Hasn't quite seen the championship come his way. At the moment, he's 8th in the F2 standings. We'll have to get in that F2 car after this as well, because they are also here with a pole position and a podium to his name so far. But we'll see what he's got for his first competitive lap time on the board for Victor Martins.
Yeah, it's great to see these rookies in the car. Obviously, Victor, this might be his first FP1 session. However, he's done a lot of test days, one earlier this year in Monza in the Williams, but before that he was with the Alpine Academy, and he did quite a few test days in the old A522 Formula 1 car with them. So while it's his first FP1, he does have a handful of experience in these cars.
When you're a part of an academy, as you were with Alpine too, what does that, I know there's certain things you can't go into, but what do you get for that? How do they help you more than if you are not part of an academy?
Let's say straight off, the biggest thing is access to Formula 1 test days, which you usually can't get if you're not part of an academy, and it gives you the link into the F1 team. So at the weekends, I spend a lot of time in the Alpine garage, sat at the back, working with the engineers and listening into the debriefings, listening to Pierre and Esteban and Fernando at that time, and what they're saying about the track. Some teams I know do help literally with engineers in the Formula 2 cars, but that's really if they're really planning on promoting a driver up to Formula 1. So I think Gabriel Bortoletto's engineer this year actually worked with him last year in Formula 2. So that is a sort of real insight that the Formula 1 teams can give, and put an engineer with the driver in F2 to start working with them earlier on in the career and just make that transition seamless.
Yeah, that's really interesting actually, because then you still feel like you've got that familiar territory, and that can give you so much confidence, right, going into it, and that's what you need as a driver. The minute you start to lack a bit of confidence, you lose time, right? So for someone like Gabriel Bortoletto, when you're, I suppose, in a team that hasn't got a great car, to have that familiar surrounding can almost give you some lap time.
Definitely. And when you come into Formula 1 as a rookie, it's overwhelming. There's hundreds and hundreds of new people in your new team that you might not know. Obviously, hundreds of thousands of fans, 24 races, which is 10 more than you get in Formula 2. So already that's a huge amount. Isaac Hadjar, I know, commented on never being at home since the beginning of the season. So
makes you question why you're paying rent.
Yeah, exactly. Might be better to live in a hotel or a very luxury RV at that point. Yeah. But yeah, it's great if you can have your engineer transition over to you. At least your inner circle might be the same, along with your physio and other people you might bring. You know that your close team is people you've worked with before, and you have that trust system with them.
No, well, let's keep a track of how Victor Martins is going. He is currently last, but just bedding in slowly for his first running. Franco Colapinto's on a lap at the moment, just turned 22 years old. Did the man from Buenos Aires, after a tough introduction or reintroduction to Formula 1, had a crash in Imola during the qualifying session. Saw him get a one-place grid drop as well for him. Monaco looked a little off the pace and lacked a little bit of confidence, but also the car also just doesn't quite seem there for Colapinto or Gasly at the moment. But to be given the remit of drive fast, don't crash, score points by Flavio Briatore, I mean, it makes sense. That's what you want from a driver, but for Franco, I do struggle for sympathy sometimes with Formula 1 drivers, because they are Formula 1 drivers, but I do feel a little bit for him coming into that team when they are down on power in the engine. They have a deficit in the straights, and here that's going to show its head slightly down that long main straight. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't for Colapinto a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And those are Flavio's words, and honestly every driver knows that. It doesn't need to be spoken and said, especially not in that direct tone, because it just, like you say, it adds a lot of pressure that necessarily doesn't need to be added. And yeah, to have those mistakes happen immediately in Imola definitely didn't give him the confidence needed to then go onto a very difficult street track that is Monaco.
We've just seen a rather funny graphic replay where they've gone to a replay for Colapinto, who just had a little bit of a wobble coming through the left-hander that heads you up towards turn 9. So it's sort of a left-hander of turn 7, quick flick through 8, and just lost the rear a little bit. But the Formula 1 graphic replay had Jack Doohan's face all over it, so clearly not quite brought up to speed there. Talk about feeling sorry for drivers. There is a little bit of that for Jack Doohan. You mentioned Isaac Hadjar a few moments ago. Racing Bulls had an incredible run in Monaco. Yes, they manipulated the change in the pit stop rule to their benefit, but for Isaac Hadjar, the qualifying was exceptional to start with. And I feel like Liam Lawson may well have made a breakthrough, got his first points of the year too.
Yeah, Isaac did an amazing job getting through to Q3 and then putting in an unbelievable lap to go into the top 6, especially first time around Monaco in a Formula 1 car. You know, in a Formula 2 car it's daunting, and then Formula 1 is just a whole different ballpark. So really good job by him, and I think he's doing an unbelievable job this season. Of course, their car looks strong, which is always nice, but yeah, definitely doing a great job. And then Liam as well to get some points and build that confidence back up from his earlier season woes is nice, and especially around Monaco where it's not an easy track, and he can show that, you know, as a talent he's still there.
Well, yeah, for Hadjar, 4 points finishes so far this season. Liam Lawson finally registered his first points with 8th place in Monaco last weekend. And at a time where, well, it's kind of died down the conversations a bit about that Red Bull second seat. Tsunoda seems to still have the support, even though clearly whoever gets in that second seat is going to be up for a struggle. But now there will come a time where Hadjar, if he continues to perform like this, and Tsunoda can't improve his pace, that conversation will start to rear its head again. And yeah, I think you have the likes of Arvin Lindblad waiting in the wings in F2. So again, the pressure never goes away, does it?
It doesn't seem to in that Red Bull family.
You almost want to say to Isaac, don't do it, don't stay where you are.
Yeah, he's definitely probably had someone say that to him. Stop performing quite so well. You don't want to be in the quote better seat. But yeah, I think it sort of died down. They put Yuki in, who's very experienced, and considering he's struggling, maybe that's turned some heads in a different direction, and they really want just the stability of 2 strong, talented drivers just to try and improve that second seat. But yeah, I mean, Max, we look at it now as in P3, only 2.5 tenths behind Lando in pole, whereas Yuki is down in 12th, 9 tenths off, nearly a second. So quite a bit of a gap there between the 2 Red Bulls.
Unfortunately for Yuki, he hasn't got the best record around here either. He's never made Q3 here. He got his first career DNF here. Scored points back in 2022, but just the 1 point with 10th place. So you mentioned experience, though. He now is actually one of the most experienced, if not the most experienced, Japanese driver in Formula 1. He is currently matching and will surpass Yukio Katayama's most Grand Prix starts for a Japanese driver when he begins the Spanish Grand Prix this weekend. Already matches him, but we'll be looking for his 96th start. Although technically Katayama did 97 entries, but didn't start all of them. So if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of it, that's that. But Tsunoda then at the moment down in 12th with the 2 Racing Bulls, which is a car that seems to be easier to drive and friendlier as a driver to operate. Lawson's up in 8th at the moment with Hadjar inside that top 10. But coming up to half an hour left of this practice session, it's actually 32 minutes and 30, 29 seconds remain. It's Lando Norris with a 1:15.2, quickest ahead of Alonso by just over 0.2 of a second. Max Verstappen is 3rd. Leclerc, Piastri, the top 5. Russell, Stroll, Lawson, Hamilton, Hadjar, the top 10. Kimi Antonelli is 11th ahead of Tsunoda. Then comes Gasly, Sainz and Hülkenberg, the top 15, with Colapinto, Behrman, Bortoleto and Victor Martins in place of Alex Albon, with Rio Hirakawa in place of Esteban Ocon for FP1. Only 19th and 20th of the drivers taking part in this session. You're listening to FP1. My name's Harry Benjamin, and I'm joined by sports car driver, former F2 driver and member of the Alpine F1 development program, Oliver Caldwell, talking you through this one. And just a reminder, one of the big things that we're going to be keeping a bit of an eye out on for this weekend is the tightening up of some regulations. There are tougher load tests on front wings that are being imposed by the FIA. FIA from this round. The FIA is introducing a further tightening of the load test applied to F1 car front wings, essentially, attempting to address concerns around flexibility and performance that teams might gain through the use of wings that flex when they're put under load. So when, if you are watching the screens, you can see in the slow-mo replays the front wings really moving around through the corners, under braking. They're trying to tighten that up, essentially reducing the permitted level of flex from 15 millimeters to 10 millimeters. It doesn't sound like much, but I suppose if there is an advantage to be had anywhere for a Formula One team, you're going to do it. You're not going to have your wing flexing for the sake of it, are you? However, they've had up till now to get to grips with this. So there is a bit of pessimism around, is it actually going to do anything for the competitive order? But I don't know, Ollie, if you're Ferrari and you're Fred Vasseur, if you're Red Bull and you're trying to find that small half a tenth to McLaren, something like that could change things for you.
Definitely, it could be something as small as that, but it's a weird part of the season because, you know, like you say, if the wings are flexing, then there must be an advantage to it. So you could ask, well, why isn't everyone doing it? And, you know, why aren't they focusing on the development of the front wing to match those cars like the McLaren and the Mercedes, rather than trying to impose regulations where they're taking it away? So it's sort of that bit where, you know, you might be a bit lost in your development, you've done some upgrades, and they're not working. So it's like, well, okay, what can we take away from someone else to sort of bring them back down to our level? It's a weird thing. At the moment, no one's really set any high-speed lap times, but the order's looking fairly standard.
Yeah, a couple of long runs being done. Actually, Nico Hulkenberg's just stuck on the soft tyre and gone second fastest, the 10th drifter. George Russell, who's currently fastest now on the medium tyre, 1:14.751. Well, with less than half an hour remaining of this first free practice session, let's say good afternoon for the first time to the BBC's F1 correspondent, Andrew Benson, and head over live to Five Lives Race Centre. Afternoon, Andrew.
Hi, Harry. How you doing?
I'm very well. I'm really going with it, Andrew. I know you love it. I know you love the Five Live Race Centre.
Yeah, the race centre is getting old already. You only introduced it in Monaco.
I know. You get used to it. Now, what are you making of this technical directive? Obviously, there was a lot of hubbub about it since the beginning of the season, but as we've gotten closer to Spain, the majority of the teams, at least, the rhetoric seems to be a little bit dismissive of it, if it's actually going to do anything or not.
Yeah, it's funny how things have turned around, isn't it? So look, flexi wings have been around for donkey's years in Formula One, and initially it was a tool to reduce drag on the straights, basically, while keeping the same cornering performance. So the wing basically is designed to flex above a certain aerodynamic load. The elements start to sort of compress down, so it makes the wing flatter effectively on the straight, and then it pops back up to give you downforce in the corners. But they found under these current regulations that they're a very effective tuning device, because these particular cars, they have a tendency to understeer in slow speed corners and oversteer in high speed corners. So if you can play with the wing levels with the wing flexing to tune that stuff out, so you can basically have your low speed aerodynamic performance without having too much oversteer, i.e. a nervous rear end at high speed. And this flexi test that's been introduced, this increased flexible test in terms of load that you were talking about, Harry, it's basically come about because of Red Bull moaning at McLaren. They've basically been throwing as much rubbish at McLaren as they possibly can via the FIA and hoping that some of it sticks. And there has been some quite significant hope from Red Bull and Ferrari particularly, that this test, in addition to the similar test that was introduced on rear wings at the start of the season, would negatively impact McLaren. But Max Verstappen doesn't seem to have read the party line, because he doesn't think it's going to make much difference, and McLaren are just dismissing it and saying, we don't think it's going to affect us at all. Apparently Lando Norris already tested this front wing in Imola. Of course, you never know who's being completely and utterly truthful. Usually nobody in Formula One at 100% level. So we'll have to see how it affects this weekend. But one thing to bear in mind is that what we've seen between the Red Bull and the McLaren is a sort of switch of performance over different circuit types. And this is the sort of circuit where you would expect Red Bull to be closer to McLaren again, because it's mostly medium and high-speed corners, like Suzuka, like Jeddah, like Imola. So even if Red Bull qualify on pole and win here, it doesn't necessarily mean than it has been to do with this flexi wing test that's been introduced.
As you say this, Andrew, Verstappen and Leclerc are 1 and 2, so therefore it's worked for them, hasn't it?
Yeah, but some soft tyres have obviously helped as well.
There is also that. And Hamilton now just popped himself up into second. I mean, Ollie, you've driven a modern Formula One car, the Alpine, from what season was it that you drove?
2021. Alpine Formula One car.
I mean, so what are these, the ground effect era coming into the ground effect era car and recent modern Formula One cars? What are they like to drive? And I'm sure you've experienced this kind of thing or similar to as well. Can you put us in the driver's seat about the feeling of it through a corner?
I mean, even after driving it myself and being in Formula 2 that year, the thing was like a spaceship. Yeah. So it's really hard to explain exactly how it feels, because it feels out of this world. I drove the 2021 Formula 1 car, which arguably you could say was the greatest ones ever, with the most amount of funding and aero, and they were so finely tuned before the ground effect cars that came in the year after, with a slight delay. But they took a while to get off the ground, excuse the pun. But yeah, they struggled with those ground effects, taking away aero over the wing and making the floors work. We saw a lot of cars with porpoising, especially at the beginning, but they're getting there. They're not quite as quick, but we watch some of the onboards from these high-speed tracks and they're still so fast, and the aero load that goes over them and the speed they can handle is impressive.
Well, it is. And talk of speed, well, drivers are putting that soft tyre on. Norris took top of the times, 1:13.718. Over 3.5 tenths clear of Max Verstappen. Then comes Hamilton and Leclerc. Piastri's in the top 5. Yuki Tsunoda just put himself up into 6th, but he's 9 tenths adrift of Lando Norris. Russell is 7th, hasn't done a soft tyre run yet. Hulkenberg has, he's up in 8th. Sainz is 9th after a bit of a slow start for him in this session. Antonelli rounds out the top 10. Alonso, Lawson, Stroll, Hadjar, Gasly the top 15. Colapinto, Behrman, Bortoletto, Victor Martins and Ryo Hirakawa, the 20 drivers. Indeed, most drivers are out there as a couple come into the pits, including the Red Bull and the Racing Bulls. Also in the pits are the 2 Alpines, Martins and Hirakawa, along with Antonelli and Alonso. Everybody else back onto, still out onto the circuit. 24 minutes and 9, 8, 7, 6 seconds remain of free practice 2, and the top temperatures are heating up in Spain. Air temperature, 30.1 degrees. Track temperature, 49.1 degrees. As Yuki Tsunoda comes into his pit box and gets lifted up onto the jacks and is rather left hanging for a bit before the rest of the team come and wheel him back into the garage as he makes his way to have a look over the data. Well, we spoke about Tsunoda a few minutes ago, Ollie, but if you are Yuki Tsunoda, where that gap just doesn't seem to be coming down at the moment, I think he's clearly done better, or at least Red Bull feel he's done better straight off the bat than Liam Lawson did. But how do you keep that mindset as a driver? Because surely, and correct me if I'm wrong, you go into whatever team you're in, whatever category you're in, thinking you are the best, you are quick, because you have to think like that. But when you are suddenly up against somebody like Max Verstappen, how tricky does that become when you are then a driver on the back foot?
Very difficult, yeah. And Max has dominated everyone who's been in that second car, so I think Yuki would have known the stress, and he was very confident going into it, but very quickly sort of humbled himself in his own comments after jumping into that car. But to sort of defend him a bit, he's gone from 9 tenths to Max, that was at the start of the session, down to 7. So he's getting there, and what he really needs to focus on and what the team needs to do is have a strong team around him and consistently pick him up, and maybe not looking to how far he is off the top position, rather just compare to Max, his teammate, as that is in the same car, arguably, and that's where he needs to be basing himself off of. So the gap can be different when you look at it like that, depending on how Max is performing in the day. But if Max is outperforming the car, which he seems to be doing a lot, the gap is still quite large here.
And right now, Red Bull still only have one driver in the Constructors' fight, and I know it just seems like Red Bull don't really care about the Constructors' Championship, really, but ultimately this is a team sport, first of all, so it's just a bit, an interesting way of thinking. But again, since they've had Max Verstappen, who did win them the title 1 year single-handedly, as long as they've got him, they're okay, but there may come a point where suddenly they don't have Max Verstappen anymore.
Exactly, and with the rise of McLaren and both of their cars now coming and finishing 1-2 or 2-3 and swapping around, you know, they're dominating the team's championship this year. And while Red Bull may seem to not really care about it, there's a lot of money involved in that, and I'm sure some sponsors care. So they've got to be quite careful, and of course it's good for the brand when both drivers are getting up there and getting on the podium between them and not just one.
No, Norris currently fastest, by the way. Verstappen, Hamilton, Leclerc, Piastri, the top 5. Behrman's just put himself up to 6th on the soft tyre. Hadjar also continuing to impress, up in 7th. Tsunoda, Russell, Hulkenberg, the top 10. Sainz, Bortoleto, who on the soft went to 12th, ahead of Antonelli. Alonso, Lawson, the top 15. Stroll, Gasly, Colapinto, Martins, and Hirakawa, the 20 drivers to take part in this session. You spoke about rookies, Ollie, at the start of this year, you know, to have 6 come in this season, and seeing Martins and Hirakawa get their FP1 runnings, and each team having to run one driver for FP1 for each car this year, which is an increase in the regulations. I mean, it feels like, even though pre-season testing, for instance, or mid-season testing back in the day, that's almost gone out the window, it's so limited. This feels really encouraging to see these kind of, you know, the next generation, the new influx get their shots, get their chance.
Yeah, Formula One seemed pretty stagnant with the driver lineups for quite a long time. Whether you could see it from the outside or not, but certainly from a driver's perspective, it really felt like that from me coming up from Formula 4 all the way to Formula 2, was no one was really going in. And you had a couple of drivers like Oscar Piastri completely dominate Formula 2, which is meant to be the feeder series into Formula 1, and still not get a seat directly. So this year to see so many rookies out is great, and I think that was all kicked off by partly Oscar jumping into the McLaren, who thankfully gave him a chance and really performing and being straight on the pace, but mainly Ollie Behrman, who jumped in the Ferrari, which was a strong car at Jeddah, and doing an unbelievable job around what is a very difficult track and scary track to drive. But then, you know, he performed so well. I think that really set off a chain of reactions of teams looking, and managers and the board of directors going, wow, okay, these rookies can potentially perform better than our experienced but slightly older drivers.
Do you also think now the rookies are generally better prepared than ever in an off-track sense too? Now there's so much more focus not only on the physical side of training, but the mental side too. You know, obviously there's more modern technology. That helps them be better prepared than the rookies of 10 years ago, surely.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you've got huge teams around Formula 2 drivers now, and one thing that is, you know, a bit hidden but is very important is, I think, in a way, the Formula 1 cars are much easier to drive than they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Yes, they're going a lot quicker, but they've got so much more downforce, so many more technical things on the car. To be quick is relatively easy if you're a top-performing Formula 2, Formula 3 driver. So where they've increased and made the Formula 2 cars closer to the Formula 1 cars, they're definitely more prepared. Plus, being part of a team such as Alpine on the junior categories, they are putting them into the simulator. Whether they even think about them going to the F1 car, the rookie drivers in F2 and F3 have so much knowledge now that they can still help the development of the F1 cars, and they're getting a lot of simulator time because of that. So if they then get the chance to drive the car in real life or race for it, they've already done 50 simulator days in a couple of years, and, you know, a few Grand Prix.
Well, talk of jumping from that to an actual car on track, Victor Martins is just coming to an end of a better lap for the Frenchman. Personal best for him in the middle sector and the final sector, and finds a bit more lap time, puts himself up into 19th, 1.9 seconds adrift of Lando Norris, but a 1:15.6 for Victor Martins. Carlos Sainz is, a 1:15.6 for Victor Martins. Compare that to Carlos Sainz, who is up in 12th at the moment on a 1:14.9. So Martins bedding in nicely. Of course, one thing that Martins and Hirakawa will be wary of, and Hirakawa as well, already having a skirmish with the gravel in the early stages. It's all well and good wanting to show your speed, but you don't want to crash the car, right?
Definitely, and FP1 is not the place to do that. We have these rookie test days at the end of the year where you might be able to push a bit harder, but the last thing you want to do in especially Victor's case is jump into your first ever FP1 and clatter the wall, which we have seen some rookies do. But yeah, it's not ideal, but yeah, it's a bit of a slow start from Victor and Rio. We've seen they had, at the beginning, they had those big metal grids on the car, so doing a lot of error and data testing. I don't think they're being given very fast runs at the moment. You know, Rio hasn't set a relative lap time at all, although now he is starting one as we're talking.
Yeah, he's put on the soft side. He's just made his way out of turn 4, downhill braking into the left-hander of 5, touch on the brakes. Now you're heading downhill to a slight kink of turn 6, taken flat out, then onto the brakes, into the left-hander of 7, again a slight right-hand kink through 8, takes you uphill, flat to the floor if you can, fastest corner on the track, turn 9, then you get a dose of DRS, your second dose, into the tight hairpin at turn 10. That was reprofiled a couple of years ago to help with the bikes as well, and also some overtaking opportunities for us. Strain it back up briefly before you then swinging through the right-hander of turn 12, which feeds you out up and over the hill at 13, and now, well, the old tricky chicane is long gone, so it's just another flat right-hander through 14, slight lift at this stage, and then you're back onto the start, finish straight with that dose of DRS, and he improves on time. Does Hirakawa, goes up to 15th place, 1.5 seconds adrift. His teammate Ollie Behrman up in 7th, 8/10 adrift of the ultimate time, which is currently held by Lando Norris.
And the front left doesn't look good, to be honest.
George Russell not happy with how his tyres are looking this early in the weekend, but the track is very low on grip at this point. Not much is driven, so it can still be quite dirty. Another reason for the teams and the drivers just doing these weird slow runs at the beginning, getting some aero testing out of the way, checking all the sensors and maybe seeing any changes with the new front wings. And as the track rubbers up, I'm sure we'll see, like we're seeing now, more softs go on, and FP2 and FP3 will be much quicker as the track rubbers up and the cars get quicker.
George Russell is the sound you're hearing at the moment as he's still out there on the medium side, just coming down the start, finish straight now. It's an interesting one with Mercedes. For a while, it felt like they were very much there. I mean, look, they're sitting second in the Constructors' Championship. George Russell's in the top 4. He was enjoying his best season so far until we got to Monaco, and overall, on average, still is. Made some comments after Imola about the tyre management and the degradation that they were feeling, as we've already heard now, and it still feels like they haven't quite solved how they're managing these tyres in certain temperatures. The hotter temperatures not favouring them, although we raced in Miami and then they performed quite well, but then Imola was also hot and they didn't. So that's what George came out with, but I'm struggling to see that black and white. They'll know more than us with the data, but it still feels like Mercedes are a little bit away from ultimately getting the jump up there with Max Verstappen at least, and the two McLarens.
Yeah, I think the Mercedes looks to be in quite a narrow window of operating. They seem to be struggling if it's too cold, if it's too hot, the tyres get too hot too quickly, and then that seems to be based around how harsh the tarmac itself is. I also don't think they're very happy with the upgrades that they're bringing. They're not doing as big a jump as they would hope, but they're working hard back in Brackley on the simulator. I know over this weekend with their reserve driver Frederic Vesti is in the simulator all weekend, trying to get them back into that top 10 and, well, hopefully top 5 and a potential podium like last year.
Always a shout out to the reserve and simulator drivers. Never forget them. Am I correct in thinking you were part of the Alpine Academy when Oscar Piastri was a part of it, and you would do some running sort of back to back and things like that? So seeing how Oscar Piastri has been this season, obviously heads the championship, I feel like he's really made a step up this year in particularly qualifying and his understanding of tyre management too. Those I would say were his weaknesses in his first 2 seasons. What? On his Hirakawa first.
No, I had a bit of bouncing or bottoming entry 9, which was not nice. Understood, yeah, we can see that Ollie reports something similar.
So a bit of bouncing for Hirakawa in the Haas, always reassuring when both drivers are reporting the same issues rather than one. So Haas then trying to dial that out before Esteban Ocon returns to the car for FP2. But Oscar Piastri, a lot is made of him this year. I feel like he's really coming into this sort of personality, this cool, calm and collected character, dry sense of humour, obviously incredibly rapid, but off the back of maybe a couple of uncharacteristic weekends. Imola, the early braking into Tamburello. crashing a couple of times in the Monaco weekend too. I mean, the pace is obviously still there, but what is he like as a driver, someone to work with? You know, is he a born champion like you've always known him as?
So I've known Oscar for quite a long time. Since 2017 we were teammates in Formula 4, and then like you mentioned, in 2022 when I was doing Formula 2, he was part of Alpine as well as I was. We were next door neighbours, and we were in Prema at the same time. Regardless, he was in Formula 2 while I was in Formula 3, so yeah, I know him quite well, and what is reassuring is he hasn't changed a bit as he's come into Formula 1.
It hasn't got to his head.
No, it hasn't. He has not changed at all. He's still as calm and nonchalant as he always was. But yeah, he's finally getting to grips in, what's this, his third or fourth season in Formula 1 now, but it's always hard to come into a car that's performing strong, like the McLaren was, with a teammate who's been in it for a number of years, longer than you have, and Lando's been there for quite a while. He knows a lot of the intricate details which take a while to understand in Formula 1, and track-specific details as well, which when there's a lot of tracks that Formula 2 or Formula 3 don't go to, and the first time you drive there is in a Formula 1 car, is so difficult to get your head around. So, you know, there's some tracks where this could be Oscar's only third or fourth time driving around them. Okay, you get a lot of laps during the weekend, which is very nice with 3 practice sessions and potentially 3 quali sessions, so you can get it to Q3 and a race. But yeah, he's really showing his dominance that he's shown in the junior categories before now.
And off the back of those last 2 weekends where, you know, he has lost ground in the championship, but it is still early stages, is he the type of character to not let that get to it?
Yeah, it's actually been nice to see Oscar have a few mistakes, because it's not really something that we've seen yet for him in Formula 1. Yeah, it's out of character. He didn't look as comfortable as normal around Monaco, really sliding the car around, clattering the wall a couple of times. But that does actually fit in with Oscar's character, like you say. I don't think it will impact him at all, because you saw him have an incident in FP1, and then immediately for the rest of the weekend he was still sliding the car around and still doing good and performing well. So
I just need the engine going normal on the straight for the first run.
We're happy to try strap 3 if you prefer.
I just don't want to lose 2 tenths every straight.
Fernando Alonso then trying to figure out which strat and engine mode to be in, and not avoid losing time on the straights. Of course, off the back of a retirement in Monaco where he was running in the points, but a power unit issue for Fernando Alonso, seeing him retire out of that race. So losing that engine entirely from his pool, I think he confirmed that in the Thursday press conference coming into this weekend. So a little bit of ongoing there from Alonso, but Piastri, just to come back to him, currently 5th, but he's about half a second off actually to Lando Norris. But it's interesting what you say about, you know, we come to these tracks and you know, we were talking about the next run of races, quite good Lando Norris tracks, but of course that feels like it's changing a lot this year. Max Verstappen has been dominant for so long. I was looking back through the stats coming into this weekend. Since 2016 this race has been won by Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton and nobody else. And then you look at the season McLaren have been enjoying last year and then into this year. They haven't won in Barcelona since Kimi Raikkonen in 2005. The last time they qualified on the front row and locked it out 1-2 was 1998. So it just goes to show how long it's taken for them to actually be back consistently to the top. So we do genuinely arrive at some racetracks going, well, Norris has the experience here, but actually, well, now he's got a great car, but Piastri may not have his level of experience, but the car is performing at max capacity. So generally in Formula 1 right now, it's quite hard to call it.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, where McLaren, you know, might have struggled here in the past, it's because these teams in cars have done so many laps around here that when you're a bit off the pace in those dog seasons that you can have, it can be hard to just get up to the pace in every single track. But it's looking good for McLaren right now, P1 and P5. Maybe not a great lap from Oscar, but we haven't seen an onboard, so whether he got some traffic or made a mistake, I'm sure he's going to be up battling Lando for the rest of the weekend, as well as Max.
Yeah, well, McLaren's strength is keeping its rear tyres cool, which will certainly help in corners like we're just listening to Liam Lawson go through, coming through 11 and the right-hander of 12, really quite rear limiting for these Formula One cars to keep those rear tyres in check, and that's where McLaren have been quite strong so far in those traction zones and the low-speed corners. So if it's going to suffer anywhere, that McLaren, we'll see how the technical directive may change things for this weekend, but it just suffers a little bit in the higher speed corners, not massively so, but that's where Red Bull then come back into play a little bit. So that sort of ebbing and flowing of the competitive order, suddenly when Max Verstappen is given a little bit more in the high speed corners, he comes back into play. Yellow flag out on track, but it's gone back green again, so haven't seen who it's for. So somebody's either had a bit of a skirmish and made their way back onto the track, but lives to fight another day. It's 6 minutes and 27 seconds remain. Lando Norris is fastest, ahead of Max Verstappen by over 3.5 tenths of a second. Then it's Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc and Oscar Piastri in the top 5. Liam Lawson, who's out there at the moment, running well in the top 6, ahead of Behrman. Hadjar is 8, Tsunoda 9th, Pierre Gasly rounds out the top 10, with George Russell in 11th, ahead of Lance Stroll. Fernando Alonso, Nico Hülkenberg and Sainz the top 15.
I need to check what is going on with the car. Something wrong.
Alonso in 13th, not happy with something on board his Aston Martin. He is 13th, ahead of Hülkenberg and Sainz. Bortoleto, Hirakawa, Antonelli, Victor Martins and Franco Colapinto 20th and last, with just over 5 minutes remaining.
Yeah, Fernando not happy with something going on with his engine there, which is not reassuring after the issues he had last weekend, but at least they've got quite a long time to hopefully fix the issue. The teams won't be running the engines at full speed, definitely not in FP1. That will be coming later in quali. So yeah, not great to be having issues this early into the weekend, but they've got a few days to sort it out.
They certainly do, and also the track gripping up as the cars go around. We've got some support categories here this weekend too, which will help with that. So expect lap times to speed up as we get throughout the weekend. With about 5 minutes left, should we check in with Andrew Benson, the BBC's F1 correspondent? Andrew, it is early stages, but any key takeaways so far from practice one?
Well, it looks very much like any normal practice session, doesn't it, at the moment, Harry, with a McLaren fastest and a Red Bull second. I mean, it's very early days, as you say. We can't really draw any conclusions at the moment. One thing I would say is that the trend of this season is that Red Bull have quite often looked uncompetitive or relatively uncompetitive on Fridays, only to make a step forward on Saturdays. Second doesn't look too bad from Verstappen on the face of it, but he's 3.5 tenths behind Norris, so I wouldn't be surprised to hear him complaining about balance issues. Balance seems to be his bête noire this year so far, but we'll have to wait and see, and a little bit later when we get the race simulation runs. I know how much you enjoy bringing me in on those, Harry, so let's see what they tell us later on this afternoon.
I so do. We look forward to returning to Five Lives Race Centre in FP2 for Andrew Benson's long run corner. God, we've got a lot of names suddenly for a lot of things, haven't we? Maybe we need to fine tune that. Hashtag BBC F1. Do we like Five Lives Race Centre? Do we like it? Let us know. Hashtag BBC F1. I'm all for it, personally. I introduced it in Monaco, completely catching Andrew by surprise. Producer Joe is telling me he's already got long run corner Sting ready to roll. If that's not a reason to come back in a couple of hours' time for free practice 2, I don't know what is. And in the last few minutes, I mean, Ollie, maybe this is an unpopular opinion, or maybe it's a popular opinion. Maybe I should say it on the radio, or maybe I shouldn't. But I honestly think one practice session and then let's get on with it.
Well, that's what Formula 2 has, and Formula 3, and these guys are meant to be the best of the world. It's a conversation that's been had in the sport, and certainly in the paddock for a long time, is you've got these guys, top of the game, meant to be the best in the world. Why are they getting the most track time? You know, I would have certainly liked some more track time in Formula 3 and Formula 2, not just one 40-minute practice and then straight into quali. I think they can do it. The teams might think differently and say they've got sensors to check on and everything, but it's a lot of track time for the greatest. So yeah, I could be open for that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember commentating Formula 3 a few years ago, and actually the one practice session they got, it was chaos usually, because everyone's trying to find a place on track to set their quickest time, and that wasn't even qualifying yet. I think, look, the reason is, isn't it, and we have had this discussion time and time again, is this is what people tune in for, this is what people are paying the money for in the grandstands, and they want bang for buck. They want to see cars on track, and the Formula One car is the pinnacle of motorsport. These drivers now, more so than ever, pretty much all 20 are becoming household names thanks to Drive to Survive and all of that, and the social media that comes with it. However, I love a sprint weekend because it just throws you into the unknown. Everybody only gets that 1 hour, and then you're locked in for qualifying. The drivers are on the back foot, the teams are on the back foot, we watching are on the back foot, generally not quite knowing what's going to happen. Some come out of it better than others. A sprint weekend format would not work for 24 races of the year. But I think there is, I'm going to try and corner Stefano Domenicali, have a word with him, and I think there is something to be done there. Maybe on the, to have two, I'd take 2 races, 2 slightly shorter races. I'd take that in a heartbeat, as long as we're not taking away from track action for fans, but equally increasing the jeopardy of the competitive action. But then of course you get everybody going, well, this is a sport, not an entertainment show. So I don't know where you sit with that one.
I think Formula One seems to think it's working, because every year on year they're adding more sprint weekends, so it definitely throws something into the mix, and it's nice to see them racing more than once a weekend. And like you say, throwing in with only 1 practice session before then going into sprint quali is always exciting, and it can throw out the order, especially if there's different weather conditions as well going on throughout the weekend. It throws in the equation for 1 wet race, 1 dry race, a wet quali, who knows. It does make it exciting, and I think the sprint weekends are always fun, and the drivers like to have a little race then properly in a quote-unquote an actual race rather than in a practice session, which they sometimes seem to do. But as we get to the end of P1, car's starting to now do some practice starts, but it's all pretty wrapped up. Fernando's out the car, obviously not happy with his power unit issue that's going on there. It's getting quiet now.
Yeah, just having a quick look at what the weather, while you mentioned it, was going to do for this weekend. Sunshine today, expecting a bit of cloud cover tomorrow. Sunday looks a little more overcast, but I'm not sure we're seeing any rain this weekend. There is a small chance of Sunday, but we're talking less than 10% chance as it currently stands, and every other weather app will tell you something different too. Actually, as a driver, what did you use to check the weather?
So a lot of the teams, the FIA has their own weather radar system at the track, which you've seen on the TV broadcast a lot over the past few years. So the teams do use that because it's kind of what everyone has. The other application that a lot of teams use is one called Windy, but everyone seems to use that, and it's a very similar based weather radar system. They can sometimes throw up some curveballs with wind and everything, but who knows? I mean, the BBC's got their own one, so
there we go.
That's pretty accurate. I think a lot of teams use the FIA radar, and then they also put out their own little forecasts at the beginning of the weekend.
I personally only use the BBC's weather app. No other app exists as far as I'm concerned, so that's the one we're going with. Checkered flag is out, by the way. We're just getting a look at a replay for George Russell coming to the braking zone of 10. Little lock up on the front left, and actually delivers him a flat spot. Has to run wide and then completely backs off of it. So Russell's not been the smoothest of sessions for him so far, has it?
No, but both Mercedes are on medium compounds. They look to have done a race run, not really set any competitive lap times between them. And I think George is, he's right at the end of this run, seeing what the tyres can do, seeing how they held up. But that front left he hasn't been happy with since the beginning, and locking up into turn 10 was just maybe a show of that.
Checkered flag then is out. First hour's running to kick-start the Spanish Grand Prix weekend is done, and it's Lando Norris who is fastest, a 1:13.718 for the British racer, 3/10 clear of Max Verstappen. Lewis Hamilton up there in third for Ferrari, ahead of Charles Leclerc, with Oscar Piastri rounding out the top 5. Liam Lawson, after a breakthrough point score this time last week in Monaco, one of his best practice finishing results of the season. Up in 6th, ahead of Oliver Bearman in 7th, and Isaac Hadjar. Strong rookie contingent there inside the top 8. Yuki Tsunoda is 9th, ahead of Pierre Gasly, who rounds out the top 10. George Russell with that lock-up in the closing stages of this session, 11th, ahead of Lance Stroll. Fernando Alonso with possible power unit issues in 13th, ahead of Nico Hülkenberg, Sauber. Carlos Sainz in the Williams, 15th, ahead of Gabriel Bortoleto. Ryo Hirakawa in place of Esteban Ocon for this session, finished 17th, ahead of Kimi Antonelli, down in 18th for the Mercedes rookie. Victor Martins in place of Alex Albon in the Williams, ended up down in 19th, with Franco Colapinto in the Alpine, 20th and last. So first session done and dusted then, Ollie. What are your main takeaways from that one?
I was just looking at the timing scrum. I think there were a couple of wins in there for Max being in P2, obviously where we kind of expect him, but to be there this early on in the weekend is good. Lewis ahead of Charles in the Ferrari. I'm sure he'll be, wanting more, but happy with that. And Liam in 6th, 2 places ahead of his teammate Isaac Hadjar in 8th. He'll be very happy with that. That's a nice confidence boost for him off the back of his first points of the year to go into FP1 and be ahead of his teammate. But a couple of weird ones with Kimi down in 18th, quite a way behind George in 11th. Over a second off there, or about a second off is difficult. And Franco, struggling down in 20th and last place in that Alpine.
But as we say, first session, still a long way to go to evolve. When you've done a practice session, what's the first thing you're doing getting out of a car? Are you heading straight to debrief with the engineer? Is that how it works?
Grab a bit of cake on the way there from the physio, who will be giving you a towel and a bottle of water and maybe a little snack. You wish it's cake. It's probably not cake. It's more like a protein shake. Not
a nice bit of Victoria Sponge or something?
No, that would be unbelievable. But no, usually it's a chocolate-flavoured protein shake or something else that tastes pretty diabolical. But then, straight to debrief and chatting about the session. Sure, some will be very happy with that, and others will be, looking at some issues going on.
Well, Norris then heads the pack at the end of FP1. He's off for his Victoria Sponge. I think we should get some as well in a break. I think we've deserved it too. That is FP1 done and dusted. Thank you very much to Oliver Caldwell, to Andrew Benson, who will join us again for FP2, and we'll get a look at the long run data as well. FP2 will be on air just before 4 o'clock, and you can listen to us on the new Sports Extra 3. Just head to BBC Sounds and scroll along the dial, and you can find us there, and also on the BBC Sport website and app, and you can ask your chosen smart speaker. We shall see you then. It's Norris on top. See you for FP2.